Welcome to Books and Authors. I'm your host, Chris O'Donnell. Tonight, I am joined by Howard Holschuh, local Hilton Head author of The Piranha Syndrome, A Tale of Murder on a Cruise Ship. Welcome, Howard. Appreciate you coming by tonight.
Well, thank you, Cliff. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'd like to congratulate you, first of all, on being published. That's a great achievement. But I'd like to start with getting some background on you. You're a very interesting guy. You've lived in many, many places. You reside on Hilton Head presently, but that's not really home for you. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born in New York City, but as I tell everybody, my parents had enough sense to leave New York City when I was 2 years old. We moved upstate New York, and I stayed there through high school. Went away to college, and in the Navy. Ended up in the West Coast. We lived in San Francisco. Both of our kids were born there. And then I went in the Navy from there, traveled around, saw several parts of the world in the Navy, and ended up retiring in Northern Virginia.
Great.
And then we came to Hilton Head 6 years ago and live in Sea Pines now and like it very much.
Now, what brought you to Hilton Head?
The winter in Virginia, I think, probably is the main thing. Winters in Virginia can be messy. You know, you have some snow and it freezes at night, melts in the daytime, so you have mud and slush in the daytime. You have ice at night, and we had 65 acres that I had to mow and scrape the road and so forth, and we had the opportunity. We came down here.
I understand. Now, you studied journalism. You worked as a radio news writer also. Did you always have an interest in creative writing and novels?
Not necessarily novels, but I've been writing all my life. I started when I was 8 years old. I wrote something called The Daily Ray of Sunshine, which was a little note that my parents put into their parents when I was 8 years old. And I got my master's degree in journalism from Stanford. And one of the professors at Stanford was also a news director of NBC in San Francisco, and he offered me a job. And I was working there for 3 years, and then went in the Navy and was writing reports in the Navy. And then after that, after I retired, I kept myself busy writing newsletters for the Lions Club and for our church, for the Historical Society. And then I volunteered for 7 years as editor and almost all the material for a newspaper for the Area Agents on Aging in Culpeper, Virginia, and did that for 7 years, and then retired from that too. So, and this is the first thing I've written that's been more than 4 pages.
Now, what was the transition like writing, say, press releases and news stories into writing a novel?
It's quite a different style. As you know, there's no one style of writing, and you just have to keep weaving the story. Actually, the story sort of grows as you type along and start doing some dialogue, and you say, "Gee, how did I get here?" You know, the story was interesting. I enjoyed it. My first real effort of writing anything this long, 250 pages. And
is this a genre that interests you before, as far as mysteries and things of that nature?
I never really thought about it. I'm interested in how I got started doing this thing. Well, my wife and I took a cruise on the Amazon River several years ago, and the Amazon itself is awesome. It's nearly 4,000 miles long. The average depth is 150 feet, and the delta is 200 miles wide, which is like having the delta from Charleston to Jacksonville. The biggest river we have around here, of course, is the Broad River. But if you can imagine the Broad River originating up in Alaska and flowing down and draining everything between here and there, the Amazon carries 1/4 of all the fresh water in the world. And it says 150 feet deep. And it's just a fantastic river, just awesome to be there. And we got there, our cruise ship was waiting for us when we flew into Manaus, which is a big city up 1,000 miles from the ocean. And it was a Greek ship with a Greek flag, Greek crew, and so that was the essence of my novel here. One of the passengers was mystery writer Mickey Friedman, and she had a seminar and outlined the essential elements for a mystery story. You have to have several main characters. You need a victim, of course. You need a detective or a sleuth. You need a couple people who want to solve it. You have a couple other suspects. But the main thing is you have to have a closed environment. The suspect can't get off, the police can't get on, so it has to be solved right there. The weapon has to be something locally on hand. The suspect has to be there throughout the entire thing. And it's just one of those elements that you have to have certain things in it. Mickey Friedman gave this seminar, and she said that nobody really takes seriously a mystery writer. but she said it's not considered good literature, but do it anyway. But the main thing she said was that nobody, to her knowledge, had ever cited a mystery story on a cruise ship.
Interesting.
And so light bulbs
go up.
I've been writing all my life, and so here's something new and different. And so, inspired by that, I took my laptop, which I had along with me, went out on deck and typed down everything that you see on board ship. What your stateroom is like, what the dining room looks like, what you see when you walk from the one room to the other. We walked around the deck, what signs, what lights, and what so forth. All the activities on board the ship. Even the in the dining room, the restaurant, some nights was in French, and so we made fun of that in the story. And then all the different activities that we had. We had exercise class, we had bridge tournaments, we had a ceremony crossing the Atlantic. We had different activities like that sort of wove into the story. I wrote everything there while we were on board ship. And when I got home, I started weaving this together and trying to make a story out of it, and I threw in 3 murders.
Right.
The ship's electrical system was sabotaged, or the ship ran aground in the middle of the night and heeled over. And
I'll tell you, I finished the book last night, and great book. It was wonderful to read. And interesting thing is, you did weave the characters so masterfully, if you will. How much of the story was based on the trip that you all took?
It was pretty much all based on that. Actually, the characters on many ships, that one particularly, the social life sort of centers around your dining room table. And there were 6 of us in this table, my wife and myself and 2 other couples. And so they are the main characters in the thing. The Steve and Kathy Roberts are the main characters, which are sort of Helen and myself. He's a photojournalist.
I would say Steve might be loosely based on yourself.
Yeah, right. And then the Brett Brandon is a police detective, which he really was, and so he sort of solves the crime on there. And then Charles Warner and his wife Sally. Charles was an African-American gospel singer, and his wife liked to shop in the boutique, and so we worked all that in. And they say to write what you know about, and so what I did, I wrote about all these people based on their actual lives as close as I could get. And the character of Steve, their children and the grandchildren have the same names as our children and grandchildren. He drinks only decaf coffee, and he wears only T-shirts with pockets and things like that. And so it just was fun. It was based on true things. Then I made some other characters. We have 3 siblings. They're a wealthy family of importers of Greek stuff on a Greek ship, and from Greece. And so that's Carol, who is described as Miss Greek Beauty Pageant. She's a gorgeous gal, and her brother is described as being like a Greek god. And then their very plain Jane sister, Ruth, who handles some of the side work. But they do importing work. Then there was a retired naval officer, a captain, who was sort of an alter ego to bring some of the Navy stuff of my life into another phase. And a widow lady named Marie Weber, who was confined to a motorized wheelchair, and that falls into the story. And then her traveling companion, Marie Dortch, and she was sort of a mysterious character at first, and then she finally appears, and she was a suspect at point, and she wasn't the suspect. But anyway, so all these people. Then we worked in the crew of the ship. The cruise director is probably the main person from the crew. He, officiates at the evening programs, and the captain and the doctor and things like that. So anyway, it was fun.
Well, absolutely. Well, we're going to talk more about these interesting characters in just a second. We'll be right back with Howard Holschuh. Welcome back to Books and Authors. We're talking with Howard Holschuh. The book is The Piranha Syndrome. Howard, one thing I want to ask you about, besides the characters being very intriguing, is the title of this book. Where did you come up with The Piranha Syndrome?
Yeah, piranha, that's the name of the fish. And I might mention my grandson designed the cover.
I was going to ask you about that. That's a very nice rendition.
That's what a piranha looks like. It's an ugly fish. But the piranha live in the Amazon River. And they have a reputation for being very deadly. But I read somewhere, as I was almost finishing the novel, that the piranha prefer to be left alone. And they just go about their own business. But if somebody bothers them, antagonizes them, they'll go in for the kill. And that's what the protagonist in my novel here, there's a feud going on there between people. And each one of them would rather be left alone, but the other one sort of needles a little bit more, and then and 3 people end up dead.
Now let's talk also about the Amazon. Your book is also, if you will, a history lesson on the area, and also an excursion into the beauty of the Amazon rainforest. Tell us a little bit about that. That must have been fascinating to see and to write about.
Oh, it was. It was, as I said, awesome. The river is awesome. As you fly over from the north, over South America, you fly for 1,000 miles over virgin jungle, pristine jungle, and you see little streams flowing around. And finally you get to the city of Manaus, which is 1 million population, 1,000 miles from the ocean. There was no way to get there originally except by boat or by plane. And they were very wealthy at the time, the people there. That was the rubber plantations. And so they have an opera house. They have all sorts of luxurious homes there. And it's just phenomenal to see in the middle of a jungle, 1,000 miles of jungle all around this modern city. And so anyway, that's where our boat was waiting for us, and the Rio Negro flows into it, and it drains the whole area from Venezuela all down into there. And it flows slowly through all this decaying vegetation and becomes a sort of a tea. It steeps the tea, and so it's actually a black, it almost looks like a dark cup of tea.
Wow.
And it flows into the Amazon, and the Amazon is draining from the Andes Mountains, bring all the mud and silt and rocks and debris and everything, and it's brown and muddy and swirling. And the 2 rivers flow together, and they flow together separately for 12 miles downstream. There's so much water, the black water and the brown water. And finally there's big eddies and big swirls, and they finally mix together. And then the Amazon, 1,000 miles downstream, maintains its brown color 70 miles out into the ocean. You can still see the brown swirl 70 miles out from land, out in the ocean. Then the equatorial current comes up and sweeps it up the thing. But it's a phenomenal river. It carries, I don't know, tons and tons and tons of silt. And as I say, it has more water than all other rivers of the world combined, and it has 1/4 of the total fresh water of the whole world is in that river at any one given time.
Now, the Amazon area has been a lightning rod also for environmentalists of late. Did you see any evidence of the cutback of the forests in that region and what is being fought
Actually,
down there?
no, we didn't. The part that we saw, maybe we were lucky, but it all looked very pristine, very virgin forest, rainforest, and a lot of birds, a lot of different types of trees. You have different levels of trees. You have the high trees with the flowers on, you have the mid stage, you have the low stuff, and people living there as they did 10,000 years ago, I guess. And but we actually were fortunate; we did not see any of the burning or the cutting or whatever. It must be going on, but we did not see it.
Now, as far as the locals and how they live, did you see much? Was much damage to their culture as far as the cruise ships coming in and the tourists coming in, which has been happening, I guess, for about 10 or 15 years now?
Not that much. There are a lot of people that lived in sort of houseboats along the river in little eddies and swirls and cutbacks. Right in the waterfront area of Manaus itself is a fishing village, and most of these houses are built on stilts, because when the meltwater from the Andes comes down, the river level raises 50 feet in Manaus. So Manaus has a floating pier, and there's a ramp that goes up and down to it. And these people live on houses on stilts that may be 50 feet high out of the river.
Wow.
And these fishermen live there, and they live pretty much primitive lives. You can smell them cooking their rice and fish heads and whatever it is that they cook. And but all up and down the river there were little settlements. There was one place that we wrote about. We call that the T-shirt capital of the world, because all the natives made T-shirts, and they, believe it or not, all the slogans were in English. Even in a Portuguese country,
they'd probably have to compete with some places here at Hilton Head, I would
I'm
imagine,
sure,
as far as
yeah.
T-shirt capitals. Now, with the book being a mystery book set in the modern day, there's a couple of things that come out that jump out that are not there, I guess you could say, and that is there's not much gratuitous sex. Matter of fact, there's really nothing.
Yeah.
And violence and four-letter words, if you will.
Yeah.
Is this something that you purposely left out of this book?
Very definitely, yeah. I don't cuss myself, and so I decided not to write any. And I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about sex to make a real good explanation of it. But I deliberately left out sex and violence, and also there are no commercial names in there. I hate these books where you say, okay, the baby is there with such and such a diaper on, or something like that. But there are no commercial names. I sort of allude to it, but. I try to maintain the thing as pure. I don't know if anybody will buy it that doesn't have any sex and violence, but
well, it's very unusual not to have that. Do you think that is necessary for a mystery novel to sell?
I hope not. Actually, we've been very fortunate in selling to our. We have a group called Folks Over 50, and we had have a meeting of that group that happened 2 days after the book came off the press, and so I brought a whole box of copies there and locked the door and said nobody gets out until they buy a copy of the book. But everybody who's read it seems to like it, and it's just a matter of doing more promotion. We're trying to get it out. It's available in local bookstores, and the publisher is doing a blitz of 50 bookstores across the country, send them copies of books and a little promotional literature, and we just hope that somebody will buy it now.
Absolutely. Now, as a local writer, how hard is it, or how hard was it for you to get published? And would you give any advice to people that are trying to get published that have done things similar to you?
It was virtually impossible to get officially published. I tried contacting several publishers. I had an editor, Cheryl Lopanic, in Beaufort, and she recommended I try just the small publishing houses first, which I did. I sent query letters to maybe 20 different publishers, and they all said thanks, but no thanks. So then I hit upon these on-demand publishing houses and tried several of those, and you just pay them $99 and they'll print a copy for you. They'll print 1 or 100, and whatever, as many as you want. So several other of our friends have tried these on-demand publishing houses, and they claim to be the wave of the future because you don't have any stockpiles of books laying around somewhere. You don't have to pay for printing 5,000 copies. You just, if you want a book, you say, okay, send me 1 book. If you want 100 books, they'll print them off. And their printing press is just like a copy machine. And you just put the disc in, and out comes the book.
Now, with people that want to get into writing books, virtually anything could be a story. What advice would you give to them?
Well, just write what you know. That's what I've been told, and it worked out for me. And it just so happened that we were on this trip, and it was a gorgeous trip and a beautiful scenery and the setting and everything. And we were able to crank in some of the history and geography of the area. I sort of faked a little bit with the folkloric show at the Opera House there the first night, and there was a real folkloric show, but I expanded to include as much history. And then we did have a resident naturalist on board the cruise ship, and so I cranked him in every once in a while, and he would describe the water depths and the lighthouse and all this stuff that you see along the way. So write what you know, and don't try to make phony characters too much. As I say, my wife and I were the basis for the main character of this one, and the people at our table, we cranked them in and made them as realistic as possible. Of course, I had to modify it a little bit, along the way.
Absolutely. Now, next projects for you. Are you going to stick with the mystery genre, or are you going to go into something else, and maybe Hilton Head as a backdrop?
Actually, as a matter of fact, yes. I'm thinking of, I've started a sequel And what the sequel would be the 5-year reunion of these people on Hilton Head. And then we get into some mysteries, and they go out for a boat ride, and the boat sinks, and whatever.
That sounds like you've got it already going through your head here.
I'm starting it, but at the same time, my daughter wants me to write my memoirs, and so I started putting notes in the computer on the decades, what happened in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And
I'm sure that could be just as interesting also, and we're going to have to cut it short right there, but I want to thank you, Howard Holschuh, for coming by tonight. It's a fascinating little book and very nice to read. And I want to let everybody know that Howard's book is available at Barnes & Noble, and it's also available online at booksurge.com. That's BOOKSURGE.com. For Books and Authors, I'm Chris O'Donnell. Good night.